everyone, and welcome to the IFIHC panel discussion on India-Africa relations in a new world order. And today, we have Ambassador Manju Seth, former ambassador of Madagascar and Comoros, Shri Aditya Ghosh, Director, International Africa CII, and Dr. Nivedita Ray, Director, Research ICWA. May I please request our panelists to come on the dais? The session will be moderated by Captain Alok Bansal, Executive Vice President of India Foundation. I now request him to come on the dais.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of India Foundation, India Habitat Center dialogue that we have every month. Africa, unfortunately, draws less interest in India because I think, as you remember, our last event had 200 people in this hall and there was no place to sit anywhere, including on the floors. So obviously that's the problem. Africa has been the dark continent for a long time. But mind my words, if 21st century is going to be Asia's century, 22nd is going to be Africa's. I have no doubts. Mind it, I think, is the fastest growing continent in terms of population, the demographics. Nigeria is one of the fastest growing countries in the world. So things are changing. It's actually full of resources, untapped resources, enormous natural resources. And India has looked at Africa in a different manner. In fact, we were one of the first countries which raised its voice against apartheid. We created the Africa Fund. And how apathetic the international community is to Africa is very clearly evident. You have a huge conflict going on in Sudan, which has killed thousands and thousands of people. And nobody talks of even mediating. People are worried about Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, everything else except Sudan. In Democratic Republic of Congo, you have 500,000 people displaced, conflicts which have been going on. Sahel region, you have the extremists who are moving here and there, and nothing happens. So I think we need to look at Africa de novo, and I think that's where we thought. I know the Africa conference was postponed for various reasons because of Ebola or whatever it is. We need to get our facts correct. But what will be the shape of India-Africa relations in emerging world order? I think that's a very important thing. And I think to discuss this particular issue, we have a very, very distinguished panel today. We have our first speaker is Ambassador Manju Seth, who is an IFS officer with extensive diplomatic experience. She has served as India's ambassador to Madagascar and Comoros and Reunion Island. Besides that, of course, she has been in Hong Kong, Dhaka, Bangkok, Paris. But she has been passionate about Africa. And I think I'll request her to take the stage and speak for 10 to 15 minutes. And then we take. You could speak here or there, whatever is comfortable.
Good evening and namaskar to all the those present here. It's so nice to see the hall quite full for Africa, though Captain Alok Bansal said it's not so full, but still it's very nice that there's so many participants here and a very distinguished co-panelists, and including in the audience. So it's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking on something, or to be discussing something which is of great relevance in today's changing world order and the new emerging order that is going to emerge, I believe, from this chaotic current situation that is ongoing. The new evolving order, there are different perspectives. Some say, or some talk of a continuing unipolar world. Some are saying G2, bipolar world. And there's another third, a multipolar world. So, which India would like to see, and many of the other middle powers would like to see, a kind of middle way, you can say, multilateral, not a kind of organization or a world order where there are different poles, and India would like to be a pole and Africa would be a pole in that multipolar world. So that evolving order that is coming about is going to be very, very different from what the situation was before all the changes and all the wars and all the disruption and the churn that is taking place in the geopolitical world, in the entire system. We can see how things are. You know, Africa has been an important continent, but earlier, what was the approach? Everyone was, not looking at Africa, but it was India for many, and India was looking at it from a different perspective as a development partner, and as for for a kind of South-South cooperation. So we had a development sort of assistance program with them for a long time. But but from what I have observed, the West, by and large, was looking at it from a point of exploitation and of extraction of their mining, of their mines. Huge resources were there. You know, in Madagascar, gold was taken out as if it was, no one's business. And other rare minerals and rare earths, all taken out very quietly from, say, from the pit to the port. So there was no value added within the country. What was paid, and it was just out of the country. So and this was true of almost all the African regions and because, a number of them were former colonies of either France or, of Portugal or of the UK. So they had all had their sort of foot in the ground, so to speak, of a hand in the pie. And they continued, even after these countries became independent, they continued with this approach of extraction, of in some ways, trying to control their economies and not allowing or not investing in any development or local jobs or local manufacturing or local value addition to all what they were doing. India's approach had been different, but India was not involved in these so much in these, mining and other extractive sort of activities. It was more involved in a development partnership. And we tried to, we had this approach of mutually beneficial approach and to share our development assistance and to share our development experience, which the Africans also were very keen to learn from, because our path was a little slow to development, but it was something that the African countries, most of them wanted to learn from. They wanted to benefit from that. But over the years, we have seen that other countries have moved in much quicker, much more, focused, in a focused manner. We were also focused, but we were focused in a little more, in a more, what should I say, diplomatically and in a helpful kind of mode, and to share, not with exploitative or an extractive kind of mindset. Whereas most other countries who came in later had that approach. And of course, we are all aware of the huge investments that, along with, of course, the West has invested in, they are now, again, re-looking at Africa. But China has moved in so quickly that we, I think, in some ways were taken aback. And, of course, as everybody says, deep pockets. So deep pockets has been their way of, and their way of functioning also, I think. And Africa sees that this is beneficial for them, so and they would like to have leverage. They don't want to be dependent on any one country. They would like to interact with every country to ensure their own national interest and national development and, for their people. But again, this varies across Africa. Africa is not one country, as we are all aware. It is 54 countries. And so for each of them, you have to sort of slightly, fine-tune your approach. You can't say one size fits all for each and every African country. And so whatever we do, we have to be able to slightly adapt and change our approach, which I think China, to a large extent, managed to do that. But that also changed. Earlier, they were just going for these big, huge, big stadium, big this, big that. and which was there for everyone to see. China made, China made, China made. They were showcasing that. But then the countries, African countries, realized, yes, we have these huge things, but what is it of any use? Is it of any use to the people or to the country? Is it creating jobs? No, because all this was built with their financing, and the country had to pay back the debt, and the workers also had come in from China. So the African countries gradually, resisted this kind of approach. And after, I think, 2012, 13, the Chinese government also changed its approach and its modus operandi of operating in Africa. And I think they have been able to do that. India has also recalibrated its approach under the development partnership, and I think they need to continue doing that as this whole world is in turmoil and a new order is emerging. We have to be more nimble-footed, and we have to look at new areas of collaboration where we have strengths. Where we have strengths, we should move quickly. Because what does each country want? They want the latest in technology, they want to create jobs, and they want to create employment for people and create prosperity for themselves, for the people. So I think we should understand what are our strengths. Our strengths are in, for instance, in the UPI, or the public digital infrastructure, which a lot of the countries in Africa would like to benefit from. They would like to have it implemented. Then, of course, sorry, the pharmaceutical sector we've seen already. We have had some success in that, but again, it's in very few countries. They would like this to be replicated across many more countries. But of course, the local governments have to make it possible, have to make it viable for our companies. So, but that is something that we have to work. Our government has to work, our private sector has to work. So we have to go along, take along our private sector. The government has to take along the private sector, talk to the governments there, and either go in for the public-private partnership, or direct investment, or joint ventures. Whatever works. Each country would have it would be a country-specific approach. We must keep that in mind. So as this is always, to some extent, true earlier, but now, in today's world where there is so much competition for Africa, everybody is looking at Africa. The G7 looked at Africa, for latest technology and AI, etc. So, the thing is, every country now is rediscovering Africa and the African continent for investments, for again, in their own interest, for leveraging their own interests, and for ensuring that they benefit from their investments and their interaction in China. In all this, the space for India and India-Africa has become a little less, but it doesn't mean that it is no longer there. The Africans recognize and appreciate what India has done so far, and they have looked at how, India's approach has been. But of course, as I said, they would like to ensure their interests, so they would like to negotiate, say, for example, for financing with the Chinese, because they have money, for defense and cooperation, defense and security cooperation with, say, Russia. And they would like to talk to the US for the latest technologies, and and so on and so forth. And so with India, what are they looking at? They are looking at, as I said earlier also, the development trajectory from India to have low-cost technology, which is, can be taken up to scale, can be, increased on scale, and will be beneficial for and create employment. And our small and medium, medium-scale industries and others would also need, as I said, to either go in for PPP or joint ventures in those countries, but hand-holding by the government would be needed. So India-Africa ties in this new evolving world order are very important, but they need to be recalibrated, rethought, and our strategies need to be restated, and together with each country in Africa. And I think the way forward is that we continue our direction, but we need to be, as I said, nimble-footed, and also increase our investments, our development aid. Of course, we don't have such huge amounts available, but a little more specific, and co-opt the private sector and go to these countries. So I believe that going forward, there is a lot of, but the other small thing that I'd like to mention here is the postponement, I think, of the India-Africa summit has been a slight setback to the relationship. It would have, given some impetus to it. It has, this was not held for the last 11 years. And the fact that it has been postponed due to probably Ebola is a slight setback to the relationship. But I think it will have to be India again taking the initiative because, as I said, Africa has many suitors now. And it would like to, see what is in its best interest. So India needs to be a little more quicker to move and to again ensure that the next summit is held at the earliest to ensure a mutually beneficial outcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Manju. There is no doubt that India had the head start. I think colonial era gave us a lot of, the entire East Africa was actually built by Indians. In fact, there were so many people, there were thriving colonies of Indians in that. I still remember as early as 1980s, if you saw a newspaper from Lagos, all the movies running were Indian movies actually. So we had a head start. We have not been able to do as well. We have done a lot, but we have not been able to do as well. Probably now in Lagos, if you see a movie, the newspaper, you find, I think not even half the movies are Indian movies which are running actually now. So this is just to say, again, Uganda, you know what happened in Idi Amin's time. Of course, Kenya also, I think large number of Indians have migrated from there. So there have been an issue. I think private sector did make an thing. In Nigeria, you had a lot of textile firms, etc., owned by Indians. In telecom field, Airtel made a very great initiative where they moved into Africa in a big way. They have not been totally successful, but that's been a setback. I've always believed that telecom, etc., are fields where we need to move in fast, in fact, because that integrates that country with you even greater, actually, because that actually incrementally helps you to expand in other fields as well. So that somehow has not really worked out. Of course, Chinese presence in Africa has had certain setbacks. There have been issues. There are certain countries which have been actually riven with debt trap and issues like that. And of course, India-Africa summit should have been a worthwhile thing, but it's just been postponed, and I'm sure we will have it very soon, as and when the time is appropriate. But as I said, private sector has a major role to play, and that is where I feel our next speaker, Aditya Ghosh, who's, I think, the Director International Africa at the Confederation of Indian Industry and has been regularly organizing India-Africa business enclaves, I think would be the right person, because I feel whereas business is concerned, it is the private sector which has to take initiative, and they can only drive the relationship closer. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to let you know, I started my career almost 22 years back, and I have been handling Africa since then. And I have seen Africa growing. I mean, certainly for the last 10 years, I'll say both India and Africa has emerged. I mean, the relationship has tightened up. But, considering the global economy today, certainly there has been a profound change. And, but the India-Africa partnership has one of the main pillars of the South-South cooperation. Today, the relationship between India and Africa is no longer confined to, as ma'am said, the developmental assistance or historical goodwill. It is evolving into a strategic economic partnership driven by trade, technology, infrastructure, energy security, and resilient supply chains. And if you see, I was just going through the countries, the fastest growing economies in the world, I mean, some of the countries are from Africa. So, having a GDP, a growth rate of more than 7 to 8%. And if you see, they have a young and dynamic population too. Why I'm saying this, because we have to understand the market of tomorrow. I was just going through, a few days back, there was an article about the fertility rate of India, which is 1.9. And I was surprised to see that Africa is 4. So, so you have to understand, the next, after 30 years, Africa will be the market for the Indian companies. And, India has got a lot to offer, starting from, as ma'am said, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, digital technology, infrastructure, human capital development, which we are already doing through different mechanisms. And, but, giving a brief economic dimension, for the last almost 10 years, we have invested almost like $80 billion in Africa. The India and Africa trade has almost touched, $100 billion annually. We have a target of $200 billion by 2030, but I suppose considering the present scenario, it might extend for more 5 to 10 years. Uh, Yes, I mean, the investments have been across energy, mining, telecommunications. As Sir said, Airtel has been one of the major company in telecom, infrastructure and manufacturing. One of the highlight, I will say that, we have now more than 47 missions in Africa. And for the past 3 years, we have opened more than 18 missions. So that is one of the major advantages for Indian companies, because I have been taking delegations to Africa. I'll be going after 2 weeks, after a week actually, 10 days to two African countries. I mean, for the past 2 years, we have taken almost like 30 delegations. Certainly we do work with African missions here. The recent mission which has opened is Aswatini, I think few weeks back in India. In India. But as I said, we have 47 diplomatic missions. I mean, I'm in touch with them. The ambassadors, the CDAs, the trade counselors, they are tremendously active, towards promoting Indian companies in Africa, and have been continuously calling me up for taking delegations. And I understand, I can do a limited, number of delegations in a year, but I see that before the ambassador leaves, I go to that country. So, and countries such as South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Ghana, Morocco, Angola, and Ethiopia have emerged as the key economic partners. And Indian companies, both from the private and the public sector, have steadily expanded their footprint across the continent. Considering the CI per se, I mean, I like to say that, we have started the Africa Desk almost 30 years back. And, we have been doing this annual event called India-Africa Conclave, which I think most of you might be knowing. And we just finished our 20th edition this year, last year. And we'll be doing the 21st edition, most probably in Kenya. And we have hosted a lot of, government dignitaries, business delegations. Like last year, we had heads of state from almost like 3 African countries. We had almost like 40 ministers and almost 1,000 delegates from Africa, and equivalently, the delegation from India. So there has been a continuous, I will say, deliberations from both an Indian and African side on the business per se. And also, CIA has been work, as I said, on delegations. We have this regional conclave, which we have been working on, with the stakeholders. And one of the important, I think, ma'am just said, we have to work on the digital UPI mechanism, because NPCI has been working aggressively, I must tell you, to promote UPI in Africa. And they have been going along with the delegations, meeting the ministries, Minister of Finance, even the governors. So UPI is one of the key element which can be given to Africa. Another part which I can talk about is the the currency trade, the trade in rupees. So that if that happens, automatically the trade between India and Africa will increase. So one of the critical priorities aside the digital is the mining and infrastructure. We have to understand that the world is moving towards clean energy, electrical mobility, and advanced manufacturing. But the major problem is the critical minerals, the resources. We have very limited resources, and as we all know, that China has been working aggressively in taking the mines. So we have to work very strategically, working with our partners in Africa. Because I'm a science student and I'm an engineer too. Because whenever I see, the periodic table, sir, there are 118 elements in the periodic table, and all the 118 elements are in Africa. So whether you say DRC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, you will get those elements there. So critical resources wise, Africa is the best, and we have to work with them. It is not just taking the resources away. We have to work on capacity building, technology transfer, and also, on investments, because that will enhance the partnership between India and Africa. Infrastructure is one of the important element. We have to work on ports, railway, logistic corridors, industrial parks, renewable energy systems, and digital connectivity. So there have been industrial parks. There's a company called Arise who have been developing, industrial park. I had been to Lagos Free Zone multiple times, which they are promoting, for Indian companies to invest there and develop their manufacturing. But yes, we have to do more. But again, we talk about AFCFTA, but you have to understand AFCFTA alone cannot do anything. You have to develop that infrastructure, the roads, where you can take one product from Kenya and transfer it to Ghana. So those type of road infrastructure has to be there. And we have to depend on major companies in India like L&T, Shapoorji, and even companies like Adani and other, companies who have been working extensively in Africa. So I think I covered more. India has one of the countries which had supported for the African Union's inclusion in the G20. Another important thing which I would like to mention today is there are a lot of trilateral partnership is happening, whether India, Japan, Africa. I have been talking to a lot of missions. I'm talking about European missions. Like I had a meeting with Italy, I had a meeting with Spain. They are very much interested to work with India and get into Africa. The companies are interested because I know that there are almost like more than 1,000 companies, 1,400 Japanese companies who are working in India. So they are I've been talking to JETRO. They are very interested in working with us, promoting those companies. And anyways, we have Suzuki selling from Indian factory here, and there are more and more Japanese companies who are interested to promote in Africa through India. So the future of India-Africa relations are based on co-creation, co-development, and mutual prosperity. And as we navigate a rapidly changed world order, India and Africa will together have the opportunity not only to strengthen economic ties, but also to shape a more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive global future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Aditya. I think there is no doubt about it. I think when we talk of digital infrastructure, we are promoting UPI. That's good. Actually, there are other models which we could promote. RuPay card for one, Aadhaar, which we have actually been a success as far as India is concerned. DigiLocker. We have come out with numerous innovations which could probably work in these countries. Traditionally, India's entry into Africa has been confined to 3 hubs. East Africa, generally Kenya; West Africa, Nigeria; Ghana; Kenya, Uganda here; Kenya, Tanzania here; South Africa. Of course, now we have a very big advantage. In Mauritius, you have actually a very important bridgehead into Africa, which is actually a part of African Union and also has very interesting treaty obligations with us, which allows that sort of thing. But I think even Indian private sector is a little conservative, just like the Indian foreign policy establishment. We don't want to take risks. I think that's one of the reasons why you don't find countries like Egypt, which is willing to give you actually a free, special economic zone, which could probably give you an access to 3 continents. I think where else would you find a special economic zone next to Alexandria or something, which would give you access to Europe, Asia, Africa? But I think, and it's not that Indian products are not selling in Africa. I think Tata vehicles are still, any part of Africa, you would still find Tata vehicles and things like that. So I think there is an effort. Green tech, again, is a very big thing, I think, as we are doing. Is it just the money power that's actually ensured that we are lagging by? Not to my mind. I think there are so many European countries whose presence is there in Africa who don't have that sort of money power as probably we have. You can say they were the colonial powers, have the historical legacy, but even we had historical legacy. I think we had enormous presence in many of these countries. So I think we need to really introspect. And well, our final speaker is Dr. Nivedita Ray, an old colleague. She's right now Director of Research at the India Council for World Affairs. And she has been dealing with Africa for at least, I think, last few decades, if not more. Over to you.
Here or there? Here.
Wherever. You are more comfortable sitting or standing? People like me generally stand because our brains are in knees.
No, then I stand then. Okay, I'll stand. Good evening. I'm audible. Good evening, everyone. And first of all, thank you, India Foundation, for this opportunity to share my observation in this important topic. And India, Africa, and a changing world order. This theme, never goes old. This is always there, because Uh, if you trace our relationship, if you look at our relationship, the way it has evolved, um, it has always been closely intertwined with the broader transformations that take place in the international system, and at the same time, the kind of changes that happens within the respective territories. And these changes basically define the relationship. Well, since most of the ground has been covered here, I would like to focus more on uh, people, people-centric enablers. But before that, let me situate this discussion in the larger context of the evolving India-Africa changed, international order, given the theme of the subject. I think the way you look at the evolution, as I said, that it is the international system and the changing realities in the respective territories that always define the relationship. So I would say that if you, uh, our relationship could be divided into four distinct global eras. And when I say, and these are distinct because the relationship has transformed. First, from let's say from 60s to 80s, and that was a year that I would call a relationship where it was more defined by ideological alignment, where it was more where the thrust was one more on political solidarity. Of course, that is because of the fact that both India and Africa had shared the common experiences of anti-colonialism, our anti-racial struggles, NAM principles, Afro-Asian solidarity. So much of these 60s to 80s were defined by the relationship. So it was an ideological element and less of economic substance, more of political solidarity. And trust was very much an important aspect. And that political solidarity today remains the basic foundation of India-Africa relations. The moment one say, well, Africa has engaging the world, but where is India different? Sometimes this political solidarity and the trust that has generated during this period remains the bedrock. Now, what is the second phase? Second phase, I would say the 90s onwards till 2000. And that was when the globalization was gathering momentum. And that was a period of economic alignment. And you increasingly saw trade, our development, we started thinking of alternative models of development where South-South framework of cooperation became very important vis-a-vis the Western aid development. So 19 to 20s was a period of economic alignment. And then major shift that happened was after 2008. And that was a defining period of India-Africa relations. Because from ideological alignment to economic alignment to a phase since 2008, it was a phase where it was internationally, there was a rising of emerging powers, world was moving more multipolar, and that was a time when you saw our relationship getting more strategic. So from ideological, economic to become strategic alignment, and it was a partnership model of development. And from 2008 to 2015, those three summit eras that we saw, our relationship got more institutionalized. And we started looking at a relationship in three tiers, from within the continental level, from the regional level, and then the bilateral level. And that took a major part of our cooperation, which was considered as a partnership model of engagement, very different from the transactional model of engagement that was earlier. And this actually, from entire summit framework, actually consolidated our relations, diversified our relations, strengthened our relations across numerous sectors. And from healthcare to education, which already been discussed here. But partnership model actually defined our approach, which became consultative, demand-driven. So this was the approach that we taken. Now, coming 2015 to 2026 now, what has changed? Now what has changed, we are talking about the world has become more polycentric, where power has got more diffused. And so you find technological disruptions are having impact on the economic and society. So in this framework, today we see the partnership no more. There is a change within Africa. African countries have become more assertive. So Africa has more uh, powers to choose, has more choices in engaging different powers, from traditional to emerging to middle to different powers. So given this kind of environment where we said, today the discourse has changed to co-development. So I see a distinct phases of relationship, from ideological to economical to partnership to co-development. And this is a transformation that has happened over the period of time. Now, coming to the point that, we have definitely, whenever, though we say that Africa remains marginalized in India, nobody talks about, there's very much less interest about it. But when we see a relationship is strengthened, diversified. But what is missing in this relationship? I think that is more important. The missing is the people connect. When I say people connect, that is because this is the understanding gap. So, and because I feel that while it has been the government to government relations, business to business relations has developed, but the interaction with ordinary people of Africa or ordinary people of India has not taken the shape the way it should have taken. Despite the fact that African mobility is increased, we have more students going, more entrepreneur class moving. So this has not happened. And this is very surprising, the fact that we have a huge diaspora in Africa. So now, many Indians, if you walk on the street, many Indians do not relate to Africa. We don't see, it's not only about our Indian citizens on the road, but if you talk about African in any metro city, they would not know what contemporary realities of India's are. That is something that is missing in the relationship. And because I do feel, and the reason for this is that, as I said, our relationship has more connected with governments, trade, commodities, but it has seamlessly not connected the minds of both sides. And that is where the issue is. So today, I feel that as the world order is changing, so the old state-centric playbook is no longer enough. So to survive and thrive in this changing world, the next phase of relationship, when we talk future, need to place people at the center. And when I say people as centric enablers, and how do you do that to build people-centric enablers? And what are the people-centric enablers? At the absolute vanguard of this transformation is creative economy. So, and when I say creative economy, in a world over, you see, with culture, creativity, storytelling, they have become the major drivers of economic growth. And somehow, and India and Africa, we have a rich culture, diversity, African traditions. But when we look at our partnership, we always keep culture, soft power at the marginal end. And even a major events, cultural troupe will be having one show at the end of it. That's it. But somewhere, I think we need to build on these people-centric enablers. And I have three aspects to talk about when I talk of which can win. One is, and one thing is cinema. Cinema, digital content, shaping narratives. Because Indian cinema has long enjoyed audiences across Africa, which not have been vice versa. But we have seen African film industries, be it the Nollywood, Nigeria's Nollywood, they have been emerging production hubs across the continent and are also having global audiences. Similar music. Well, Indian music has taken, but Afrobeats and other things has also taken a global stage. Somewhere, this potential has not been, really exploited at our end. So I think that needs to be a greater collaboration between filmmakers, writers, producers, streaming platforms can create jobs. And because these platforms will lead to creating jobs, lead to expand markets, and also foster, same time, a deep cultural understanding. And digital content also becomes very important in shaping narratives. And for decades, we've seen how global imagination has been monopolized by Western media hubs. And even of the world, they saw India, Africa through the lens of Africa. Even today, the stories that come to us is filtered through the Western media outlet. We don't have a direct as such, the stories that come to us, or for the matter, what the kind of Indian stories go to Africa, again, is filtered through the Western media sources. So digital content is very important, because today we see in Africa, there's a rising of digital creators, be it in Kenya, be it in Nigeria, and everywhere. You find a lot of digital creators have created. So it is about building the AVGC sector. And AVGC means the animation, visual effect, gaming, and comic. So by collaboration on digital storytelling, co-production, and co-platform streaming, we can build a South-South narrative pipeline. And when our digital creators will collaborate, and it will just not need to entertaining. It will strip away the global north filters and allow each others to see both sides in much truly today. Second point that I want, the second point that I want to mention is another enabler is sustainable textiles and fashion. Both India and Africa possess some of the richest textiles heritages in human history. So whether it is our intricate artistry, or if you look at Africa's prints, but the traditional model of, has treated textile as just a raw material trade. And the new model must treat it as a creative partnership. How do you do that? By linking Indian design institutes and manufacturing clusters with the booming fashion ecosystems of Africa, be it in Lagos, be it in Johannesburg, be it in Addis. So by then, we can create high-value, sustainable supply chains. So when an Indian designer collaborates with an African artisan, we aren't just shipping cotton. We are converting cultural heritage into premium global brand, creating millions of jobs for women and youth at the grassroots level. And the third enabler I think is important is gems, jewelry, and value retention. The story of diamonds and precious metals has historically been a story of extraction. Mined in Africa, processed in Europe, and consumed in West. This landscape needs to be rewritten. So India is the global capital for diamond cutting and polishing, while Africa holds the most vital reserves of these raw materials. So what the changing world demands that we can shift from the extractive dynamic to a value retention partnership. And how do we do that? India can partner with African countries to establish local training academies, cutting hubs, jewelry design laboratories within Africa. And by doing so, we can ensure that a young person in, let's say, in Botswana or Angola or Tanzania doesn't just mine the stone, but acquires the highly specialized skill to refine it, and dramatically shifting the economic center of gravity back to the global south. So, and this also requires, no people connection can happen without institutional collaborations. And that is why it is required that even institutions, for example, the Indian Institute of Gem and Jewelry is a key Africa mining nation. If it sets up for certain kind of academies in key Africa mining countries, like let's say Botswana. So this has a lot of potential. Because I do feel that jewelry is a very intimate expression of heritage, storytelling, and identity for both India and Africa. And so that is why gems and jewelry sector are generally very much dominated and employed by women, and which would give a lot of economic weightage to both women and youth. So these three sectors, I think, are very important, and because they have a lot of potential to build people connection. So why do I emphasize, when we talk of specific, these creative sectors matter today as much as the critical minerals which my fellow panelists talked about. Because the creative economy is uniquely democratized. It does not rely on massive top-down state machinery. It relies on individual imagination, MSMEs, and digital access. And by backing this creative economy with India's, just now, so we talked about digital public infrastructure. So ensuring that artists can secure micropayments, manage digital rights, and access global markets without intermediaries, we give our young creators and ultimate the tool for financial and creative freedom. So in conclusion, I will say that as we look forward to maybe next summit, these people-centric enablers need to give in much trust if we want to build a more robust and more resilient partnership. Because hard infrastructure, like it connects ports, pipelines, power grids, but people-centric infrastructure connects hearts, minds, and imagination and aspirations. So as we see, the old order was built on extraction of physical and finite resources, and it was transactional and top down. And the new multipolar world order today, what we're seeing, will be driven by the resource of human imagination. So that is why elevating the creative economy from a peripheral cultural exchange to a core pillar of strategic engagement ensures the partnership is anchored in heart, minds, and shared imaginations of people. I rest here and thank you.
Thank you, Nivedita. I think that's right. I think these shared relationships are very, very important. And I think when we look at culture, jewelry, uh, fashion, these are very nice fields where we can move forward, actually. There have been issues with lines of credit not being used because of slow capacity of some countries. We have seen in Maputo what happened. Some other places, our bureaucratic logjam has actually prevented us from moving fast. Diaspora has been actually a very, very important facet, actually. When we look at diaspora in Africa, and diaspora could be classified in three types. You have the Germitias in Mauritius and South Africa. Then you have the colonial era migrants like in East Africa who went and built the railroads, etc. And then you have the recent migrants who have actually gone with business and other issues. I think the older the migrants, the closer they are and they're more integrated into the society, actually. The biggest migration that I have seen is in the East Africa, where the colonial era migrants, many of them have actually moved up. In fact, many of them did well after going to UK and other places. But the number of, I think, ethnic Indians have gone down. Some of these migrants have done well. In fact, some of them have maintained some linkages with India. But again, diaspora is not always positive. You had the Gupta brothers in South Africa who rose to one of the most richest families in South Africa. And of course, Jacob Zuma, I think, went down with them. So you don't know what happens. So that's how it is, actually. You have to be ethical and doing well. That's what is done. One field which I think Nivedita didn't feel and I feel has an enormous potential is medical tourism. Already there are a large number of Africans, but why can't our hospitals invest there and set up those facilities? I think that could be an investment that would show that we are keen and committed to working. Medical and education, these are fields where I think our institutions can move into it. A lot of our educational institutions have gone into Middle East and Central Asia, but Africa is, I don't know, for some reasons still not been approached to such an extent or exploited, though there is huge potential. And I think people talk of critical minerals, but we should not look at Africa only from the perspective of mining. We are not exploiters. We are not colonial. We shouldn't have a colonial mindset. I think we should invest, trade, and do things which actually help in the collective good of both India and Africa. With that small remark, I think now the house is open for question, comments. Please identify yourself and try and be brief. We'll take 3 or 4 questions at a time, and panelists may or may not answer your questions. They're not bound to answer all questions. They'll answer whatever they feel like. We'll do that. Please identify yourself and then we start. I can see here first hand, so just give it to him. Yeah, after him, then you can take it. Yeah. Please identify yourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Bagai. As a common man, I have visited Egypt and Turkey, but there again, I have not thought of Africa as such. It's just, Europe and Asia and Africa, that section. But I have a good friend there called Aditya Kumar, based in Cape Town, you might have heard of him. He's doing a very good job in Africa. So I have that connection, but with very little understanding. But I have this feeling that Indians don't think much of Africans in the first place. You know, they don't think of them as civilized even. So this impression must change because, as you say, Africa is now going to be in the 22nd century the most advanced or developed place. So how do we change this people to people feeling, which you say common man connection is so important? I mean, we have Africans coming into India and universities in India. Are they treated properly or are they looked at with suspicion? How do you change that? That's basically what I'm saying. Thank you.
I am Rakesh Kumar Singh, Assistant Professor, University of Delhi. My question is to Aditya sir and Nivedita ma'am. Ma'am, when we talk about India vis-a-vis China, let's talk about Southeast Asia. Then one of the complaints is generally that China is stick to most of their problems for longer time. So do we think that we are failing in Africa in the same way as it's being said that China do stick with their problems for a longer time as India failed to do a much better in that context? Thank you so much.
Hi, ma'am. My name is Balaji. I work for a national oil company based in Mumbai. So my question is to Ambassador Manju Seth. Does it make sense to appoint a geologist on the similar lines of in some of our embassies we have defense attaches, especially in African countries because Africa is very rich in minerals. For the next 30 years, the way we are growing and our energy security as well as critical mineral security, it's very important to have someone from Geological Survey of India or some geologist from Indian government to be part of the embassy team. Because we have seen our team is present in Mozambique and we have evaluated some opportunities in Comoros and Madagascar and Sao Tome and Principe in West Africa. Some of these areas are going to be emerging as a transformational areas for oil and gas exploration and critical minerals. So does it make sense? Just this my idea. Thanks.
Okay, we'll take this round and then we'll come back to you. All those who are raising hands, we'll come to you next round. We'll go in reverse order, starting with Nivedita. You may answer any of these questions or all as you deem appropriate. Please, that's all.
I couldn't understand. Regarding perception towards Africa, that is definitely an issue and problem. And that's where I think it's important to have those stories to us. When I was talking of how do you build relations, because you don't know each other well. And there is a stereotype images that is being sold to you, and that is where Indian general perception is built about Africa, and that is where the grievance of Africa is. So I think when there is a collaborative way of storytelling and narratives being built, slowly and steadily, these kind of perceptions will change, and these kind of what you say, the racial that will change. And in India also, when we look at government levels or even education education institution level, you don't see those kind of person, but you see because in the streets, and that is because the people in the street are not so much aware about African stories, the rich stories of the rich culture heritage, and those can only become through certain ways where either through films or digital content or which enters your drawing rooms, and then only you understand those deep realities. And that's my take.
So, firstly, I'll talk about treating Africans in India. I think, sir, you asked, right? See, the thing is that when I was studying in, UK almost 24 years back, one of my friend, I'm talking about in UK in Bristol. So one of my friend was staying almost miles away from the university, place. And it was just after 2001, so when I went to UK. So he was somehow been attacked, considering himself to be from Arabs or from somewhere. So when Africans come here, and specifically I'm not talking about the personal front, but I'm talking about the universities, they have to take care of these people. I mean, I have been seeing Africans, whenever I see, I talk to some of them who stays nearby, and they don't have. I mean, university cannot, might be due to the price or whatever. They cannot afford them accommodations. So I think universities should start thinking that if you can't bring them, or if you can't, give them a place to stay, then it's better you don't call them. So those things can, because majority of the Africans who come here are students. And certainly what sir also said, that, the medical tourism, because I was in healthcare also, but they have been taken care. The hospitals do take care of them. There's a proper mechanism which happens, because I was in healthcare for 6 years and I've seen them. So they have been taken care from bringing from, from the airport till drop. So everything has been taken care by the hospitals. So that front, it's fine. But students is something which we have to take care. I mean, in the universities. And I think you said about India and China, right? See, China mechanism is different. I mean, I've been, as I said, when I traveled to more than 40 countries, I've seen China developing a township, in some of the African countries. Their mechanism is different. See, when they go, they don't know, they don't even talk about mining, but they talk about everything, inclusive everything. The services are given everywhere. India cannot work on that front. So that's why, as I said in my speech also, that trilateral partnerships, are happening, because I think that is the best way where, we can focus on Africa and we can work in Africa.
On the first one, I'd like to also add something. View of Africans in India needs to change. I think that will change very radically when they come to universities, or a lot of scholarships are offered to them when they come here to study. And in the universities, what needs to be done is to create awareness. Because in our entire curriculum, I don't remember reading much about Africa, except that the independence thing and get solidarity with them. I don't think we studied in schools or colleges, except of course where you have African studies in college. Others, there doesn't seem to be any coverage or any information about Africa as such. I think that is important. And also in universities, I remember I studied in Pune. So there's the Symbiosis now, we have management institutes, etc. Symbiosis was a small organization set up by one of our professors, because we had many students coming in from Africa to study in Pune, and from Malaysia and Southeast Asia and other countries. Many of them, of course, were Indian origin, but they were also non-Indian origin. And this symbiosis was had provided, it was to have a symbiotic relationship between the Indian students and the foreign students. So it worked very well, and they were able to integrate, and the Indian students were able to understand their point of view and vice versa. And I think that kind of system may have to be established in universities to make it possible for interaction, awareness, and to get over the mindset, or not mindset, the perspective that we have about Africa and Africans. Also, more interaction, and as very rightly mentioned by Dr. Nivedita, you need to have narrative building. Indian serials, very, very popular. We translated into French and into other languages, Arabic, etc., and also, of course, English, from Hindi to English, and other South Indian series as well. They're extremely popular. They're extremely popular in Africa, and I think that also, similarly, their serials or their audiovisual content, movies, etc., can be more widely translated and distributed in India, that create a different, it'll create a change in mindsets, which will help to get rid of this preconceived idea of Africans. And then on, I mentioned about defense attaches, Mr. Bala, Balaji, sorry, on appointing geologists in Africa, in the embassies. No, that will not happen now. The defense attaches were not in many countries, and it's only how much of a we need to see how the defense attaches, or what is their work. When we have a certain defense collaboration with a particular country, then it happens. Quiet, please. So no input. That's not acceptable. So, as far as defense attaches are concerned, they also are appointed with certain, for certain reasons, when the defense collaboration is increasing. and is important for both sides. Now, oil sector and gas sector also very important, very, very important. And I think like in space, there's space for councillors in some embassies, science and councillors in some embassies, depending on what is the level of collaboration, level of interest on both sides. Because just having a geologist will not solve the problem, because will the local government allow the geologist to go and do any kind of prospecting? No, they will not. Unless you are on a kind of say continent or something with the local government. So first that has to be done. Otherwise you can't go and what is the embassy able to do? Nothing. Because they will not allow him to go and to look at any of the fields. You have to be able to first increase the collaboration and have more companies going there, and for us to establish between their government geologists and us in the government here, and then only will the next step of appointing geologists arise at all. Right now, I don't think that will be feasible. And lastly, China, what was the question exactly? Sorry?
Okay, we'll take a next round of questions. But before that, just a few points, I think. Seeing is believing. So this perception, if it has to change, I think we need greater people-to-people connect. I think more people need to visit Africa. I think tourism still to Africa is still very muted as far as India is concerned. Some people do go to East Africa, some people go to South Africa, Egypt. That's generally by and large. People go to some wildlife sanctuaries in Kenya, etc., where they go for wildlife tourism. Then you have South Africa, very limited. You go more, you meet more people, I think. And similarly, I think Africans go to Europe and Western world for tourism. They don't come here. But there is a large number of students in many universities. You go to Sharda University in Greater Noida, I think there are a huge number of African students. We need to have some system whereby embassies as well as MEA should have some interactive sessions with these students sometimes. I think MEA should also have a system whereby somebody goes and visits various universities and interact, because that's important. I think what is important is that the students must interact with Indian students so that a better understanding evolves as far as these countries are concerned, many of these. In fact, that brings me to another issue which actually very often come to mind is of defense diplomacy. She talked about defense attaches. I'm not talking about defense attaches. A large number of African defense officers studied in our academies and they've gone on to become presidents, actually. But our armed forces are not permitted to interact with them. So what happens? They do a course, go back, and then you are completely cut off. And then when he becomes the president, he becomes visiting, you take him to this establishment, but he's actually lost connect. You could have had that sort of a connection which could have been there. Similarly, our films, they shoot in Switzerland or something. Some have been shot, of course, in Egypt as well as in South Africa and Mauritius. But I think other parts of Africa, by and large, have been left. So once films and serials, as she has brought out, are shot, I think better understanding of Africa would evolve. And that's what is important. Okay, for next round, we start from this side and we'll take all. Yeah, all in this go. Yeah. Identify yourself, ask the question, please be brief. Yeah.
Sir, my name is Sivesh Kaushik. I'm the student of Public Policy in TISS. My question was to understand what is the position of the advocacy of India for a permanent UN membership of them in United Nations, and is that a strategic corner or is that just a soft corner, because we know that China is also a part of the permanent membership?
Okay, yeah, give it to him. Yeah. And then bring it here. We'll come. Give everybody a chance. Yeah, please.
Earlier, we used to have our Punjab farmers.
Identify yourself.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Sarjit Dudeja.
Yeah.
Long time back, our farmer from Punjab went to California. They have a huge, thousands of hectares of land. Now they are the richest farmer in the world. Similarly, from China, people are going to African countries and they are having a huge lands. Why not to Indians to visit and take lands also? The second thing is that most of the cyber crimes are happening, or drug trafficking or piracy from these African countries. So how to deal this type of situation to have international collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you. Very eloquent discussion. Thank you. My question is to Nivedita and Captain Bansal. Among the ideas that we need to implement is to have a India-Africa network of think tanks. Now, as two leading think tanks, would you be willing to initiate this without looking to MEA for support? And do it yourself, even if you do it virtually, but do it with all the countries region-wise and build a regular repertoire of interaction with them. Thank you.
Uh, I'd, uh, so, uh, I'd like to build on directly on the morning session in this room itself, which was on AI diffusion pathways with Africa. Uh, so there was a session here, India-Africa Technical Cooperation. This was organized by ORF. So it was basically around building sovereign digital, public goods, like focused around voice-based AI, orchestration, localized data layers, and things like that. So my question is, you connect these technical discussions which are happening. Like there was in June itself, Kenya, Italy, and India have signed agreement on AI diffusion again. This was in June itself. So around that, what strategic architecture, policy architecture, can India and African partners build together to manage these complex realities of, technical, highly technical issues, rather than just normal trade and software exchange and things like that?
I'm K.K. Roy Chaudhary, Energy and Environment Engineer. My question is, the African continent being a hugely energy-starved region, we have the huge potential of exploring, implementing solar power in that continent. Already International Solar Alliance has already taken initiative. I think our government should, widen those kinds of initiatives and, maximize on the returns as well, because they will be most happy, because that drives their progress, energy, availability. That drives their progress, and there will be really strong relations mutually. Thank you.
Hello, sir. My name is Yashwant Karthikeyan. So my first question, my name is Yashwant Karthikeyan. My first question is, sir, can we reciprocate our institutions like self-help groups or microfinance institutions to Africa, where they can succeed? And also we are talking about mining in Africa of the critical minerals. Critical minerals are indeed necessary, but sir, how do we process it? Mining is a thing, and how do we process that? And third thing is satellite-based services. If we were to provide satellite-based services to Africa, there is a climate justice which has to be known by the people, because Africa, which contributes less carbon, it faces a lot of this climate-related climate-induced natural disasters. So we need to sort it out before. India, which is privatizing its space, nuclear, and a lot more sectors, it needs to occupy this space as well.
This is S.S. Bakhri from Institute of United Nations and UNESCO Studies. I would just like to know that which is the single largest contribution of India towards Africa in the last, say, 80 years? In which field do you think that India has contributed towards the entire African continent? Thank you.
Yes, now, as we know, now Africa is dominated by. My name is Dmitry. I'm from United States. Right now, the prevalent religions in Africa are colonial religions like Islam and Christianity. and these religions have a prejudice against Hinduism for obvious reasons. Are there any attempt made to explain Hinduism to African population, maybe somehow make them more familiar and introduce it there?
Good evening, sir. My name is Varun. I am from Niti Aayog. I'm a consultant. My question is, does India currently have the bandwidth to contribute to more stability in the rather conflicted parts of Africa? Because I believe perhaps India could, help with capacity building and improving the institutional quality in these regions. Thank you.
Now request the panelists to respond. There are too many questions. They may select the questions they wish to respond to, starting with Ambassador Manju.
So I think already we are doing a lot of work in the solar power sector through the IHC also, and India has been funding projects there. And I think it has been expanding, yes, but it's not on such a huge scale. And because there in agriculture, it's there in various countries in Africa where we are collaborating, and already we can see, more and more interest in Africa to collaborate with our companies. And also, if you see in agriculture, it's very important because it is, and there is where in India also we are utilizing it, but we are deploying it. But in Africa also it has started. Then advocacy in UNSC for India, I think somebody asked for this. I think it is not it is something which is which is there as an aspiration for India, one of our priorities, that we would like to be part of the decision making and rule making, because the UN Security Council, as we are all agreed on, does not reflect the current realities. But along with India, there are other countries, including Africa, who want to be, and who we have been saying should be on in a reformed UN Security Council. So it is not just for the sake of it. And I think along with like other countries or other sort of claimants, should I say, or other people who are other countries who are wish to be in and see the reform and be part of the United Nations Security Council. I think we have been advocating, and we will work with all these countries and all these people who would like to be part and see a reform in the UN Security Council and be a part of it, to be able to shape the future trajectory of the UN itself. And I think that's the two questions that I have.
Starting with solar, I think, as far as I know, as ma'am said, ISA has been working very closely in projects in Africa. And I know that a lot of Indian companies who are having the assembly units for developing solar pumps and solar refrigerators. So solar is something which is working very well. Otherwise, if you talk about wind energy, there's something renewable which is not practically possible. Due to the huge cost. Ethiopia has been working on, hydropower, but certainly that is working very well. But otherwise, even Zimbabwe is also trying for hydropower plant. So renewable, you can say, is working quite well. But yes, we have to do more and more, considering the population increase. And critical minerals, I've already explained. I think somebody questioned. Yes, fintech companies, there's a huge opportunities in Africa. I know there are 2-3 companies which I could remember, like Axiva. They are working very well with the governments in Africa. Space, I see, if you talk about space, we have been working very closely with MEA in trying to develop relationship with, the space agencies in Africa and India, with ISRO. But you have to understand, we have only, I think there are 5 countries who have got a space agency. So we are working with them, like I could remember, I think Egypt, South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and there's one more country. So there are only 5 countries. So we are working very closely with them for projects. And so, yes, I think these are the questions which I could remember, yeah.
Think tank connection within India and again connecting with African think tanks. That's what you were saying. But let me say in only one, let me say in case of ICW.
Yeah, government funded.
Government funded think tank.
Okay. So if you look at ICWA as a government-funded think tank, we have around 15 MOUs with African think tanks. And always wherever our attempt has been to do a dialogue, it has been always from our side. It has been we are pushing for it, and the reciprocity from their side is very minimal. So while we have seen in other part of the countries in Southeast Asia, for that West Asia also, there is a vibrant think tank culture in terms of interaction. We don't see that in terms of it when you talk of India, Africa. It's good that think tanks within India, we keep discussing, interacting, bringing together. But how would think tanks from Africa would reciprocate the same remains a challenge. A few of the think tanks may be active, maybe in South Africa, Nigeria, NIA. But even if you look at Codesia, the response is very bad. So there is, of course, in Kenya, some of think tanks are playing a major role now. They want to engage, but not the way that is. So any interaction needs to be a two-way. It cannot be just pushed. And I would say, sir, when you were there, you started off this process of academic and think tank network. And we had tried, so it is not fruitful. So there is a two-way thing that needs to be looked into this. Solar power has already been discussed. There's a lot being done under the International Solar Area Framework. Yes, renewable energy is something that African countries remains power deficit is a biggest infrastructure challenge for them. And of course, they are now trying to enlarge that energy basket into renewable, both wind power, solar power. And critical minerals is again important aspect in that when they're looking at many of the countries are trying to fulfill that net zero emission target. So there is a lot of focus within the African countries towards going more towards renewable energy. And that's where the critical mineral comes. They want that much of co-productions, everything that happens within Africa itself. Somebody asked of what is the India's contribution? Single largest contribution. Entire African country, I think it's capacity building and education, and ITech remains one of the major important contribution when you talk of our capacity building. And that has been USP of India. Other than we talk of UN peacekeeping and conflict, that remains other part of the story. But if you talk of India-Africa collaboration, ITech since 1960 till now, that has been, India has trained Africans, both students and in different sectors, professionals. So in that way, in terms of capacity building, capacity enhancement, both at the professional level as well as institutional level, India has been one of the greatest contributors to that. Then somebody talked about stability, about what, I don't.
You wanted defense forces have the capability of providing stability in Africa.
In conflict areas. I think there's a lot of capacity building initiatives that are being done. And well, India's approach has been how far African countries, African regional groups take their own initiatives in terms of multilateral force, and India is supporting that. So, of course, security and stability in Africa remains a very, very critical aspect of India's collaboration when we talk of our stakeholders.
Before we call somebody for presentation, just a few points, I think some of the issues. Ambassador Gurjeet asked for network of think tanks actually. We've been trying our level best actually. For our Indian Ocean Conference, we have been inviting think tanks from Egypt, Kenya and South Africa, which are the few countries which have think tanks actually. Many African countries don't have think tanks, devoid of government actually. Unfortunately, they've not been coming. In fact, and this is when I'm talking about, we were taking care of everything. Travel, local hospitality, everything. And then also we could not get, apart from Egypt, with which we have a robust bilateral arrangement, which we are doing. But South Africa, which we were very keen, Kenya, which we were very keen, we have not been able to get. In fact, there has been some amount of reticence and of course some amount of failure on the part of MEA or our diplomats in Africa who have actually not been able to push people because We have got people from across the globe, but somehow, I don't wish to comment on it. There has not been that sort of a drive which has actually done. As far as solar power, somebody said, yes, we are moving into solar power in a big way. But again, remember, we are producing solar panels, etc. But basic ingredients are still coming from China. We are dependent on China in a very big way. That has to be done. Critical minerals. Earlier we used to call rare earths. Now we talk critical minerals because rare earths are not really rare. It's only the processing which is a problem. So processing is the key. Have we mastered it? We can do that, decided. Agriculture, somebody talked of. There was a proposal in Ethiopia to go and do agriculture, large scale corporate agriculture. I don't know if it went on. But please understand, agriculture entails transfer of land. And land is very, very sensitive issue. Wherever there is a transfer of land, there can be problems. So you can only go to places which are sparsely populated, something like Namibia, if you can work out something. Otherwise, places where there is already pressure on land, there'll be problem. And that actually creates a problem of security. Many of the African countries, one of the big issues of security. And when I say it's not conflicts or something, it's a day-to-day security. I remember somebody who was in Nairobi, he says, very difficult to stay here, safe and secure. There were people who were living in Lagos. Their companies used to give them certain amount of money to be kept at home. In case some robber comes, please give him the money so that it doesn't actually kill you. That was the status. You had to keep a certain word of notes in your car. In case if you get breakdown and somebody comes, you actually pay it up. Now, with that sort of a security situation, there are issues which we'll have to look into it. Religion. Now, that's a very interesting question. If you look at African native religions, they are quite Hinduism is also often considered the largest pagan religion, actually, and I don't know whether it is so or not. That's a debatable point. But there are a lot of. In Ghana, Swami Ghananand started a monastery, actually. The Hindu monastery was started. He was actually an African who came, studied here in Haridwar and Rishikesh, and that he has his monastery running. There are a lot of people. Other places, I think the Hinduism is primarily the Indian diaspora which has built. There are some Africans who have actually taken to it, but nothing, no big issue. Bandwidth to provide stability. See, after the initial 50s where we acted in Congo against Katanga separation under the aegis of UN, Indian policy establishment has been very reluctant to actually move in anywhere with the forces. I think we did try in our neighborhood, Sri Lanka and Maldives, where we did make 2 successful interventions. But I think Indian policy establishment is very, very reluctant to move so far off. I think we have the bandwidth if required. Our experience in Somalia was not very good, where we actually acted as part of the UN forces, and that's what is the thing. So that is what we could look at. But overall, it's been a very interesting discussion, and I think I must thank all of you for coming and sitting through this discussion on Africa. Our next program is on 8th of July, where we are discussing a book, The Durian Flavor, which discusses India's relationship with ASEAN countries, and I'm sure you'll all be there. I'll now request my colleague Trishila to take over for felicitations.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you to our panelists for enlightening the audience. This was indeed a very enriching discussion. May now request Major General Dhruv Katoch, Director, India Foundation, to felicitate our speakers.